The hit and run carrier raids were, that's what they were called in the press. They were basically just aircraft carrier raids throughout the Pacific in early 1942. It was in response to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The Navy, the U.S. Navy, had to strike back at the Japanese with whatever we had, which wasn't much. The only thing that we had as an offensive weapon was the aircraft carrier. And aircraft carrier tactics and aircraft carrier warfare was in its infancy in 1942. So there were a lot of mistakes made by the United States Navy that we later learned from in battles like Midway and Coral Sea and later battles as well. But the hit and run carrier raids at the time in 1942, the first one occurred February 1st. It was the first offensive action by the U.S. Navy in World War II. The first one, or the first few, really, at the time, they didn't think that it did a whole heck of a lot. It didn't really have a big military effect on the war, or at least that's what they thought. We didn't do a whole lot of damage to the Japanese positions or ships or things like that. But what they found out after the war, in interviewing Japanese admirals and reviewing their documents and papers and things like that, they found that the raids actually had more of an effect than they initially thought. While the American raids really didn't harm the Japanese military at that time, like we didn't sink, 25 ships or anything like that, or, shoot down 200 aircraft or anything like that, we made them change their plans. We made them alter their plans and alter their timetable, and that really threw them off. And by altering their timetable, in March of 42 at Leh and Salamao, which was another carrier raid, hit and run carrier raid, it caused the Battle of the Coral Sea to be postponed, or it caused the Japanese operation in the Coral Sea to be postponed for a month, which allowed the Navy, our Navy, to send 2 aircraft carriers down there, the Yorktown and the Lexington, to intercept the Japanese carriers, and resulted in the Battle of the Coral Sea, which was a slight victory for the United States, but a victory nonetheless. It was the first aircraft carrier versus aircraft carrier battle in naval history. It was the first time that 2 opposing fleets never saw one another, and yet they did battle. In the ensuing battle, the U.S. Navy sunk 1 Japanese light carrier, and the Japanese sunk 1 of our fleet carriers, the Lexington. We did heavy damage to that fleet carrier, Shokaku, and we ravaged the air group of the fleet carrier, Zuikaku. And the U.S. carrier, Yorktown, took heavy damage as well. So it was kind of a draw, really. The light carrier we sunk, the Shoho, was really, it was a bad trade-off for the loss of the Lexington. But what the Coral Sea operation did for the U.S. Navy is it halted the Japanese expansion. They were attempting to take Port Moresby and use Port Moresby as a staging point for the invasion of Australia, which of course never occurred because we won in Coral Sea. Also, by damaging the Shokaku and really decimating Zuikaku's air group, it took those 2 carriers out of the Midway operation. They were slated to go into the Midway operation. So instead of having 4 carriers, the Japanese would have had 6. And with the loss of those 2 carriers from their battle plan, it evened the odds. They still had 4 and we only had 3, but it made the odds a little better in our favor. It helped us out at Midway, which of course was a tremendous victory for the United States and it helped turn the tide of the war. Well, it's important to me to get the information out there because these were our first victories against the Japanese. I mean, Pearl Harbor was obviously a defeat. After Pearl Harbor, things just went south. I mean, people didn't think you could get any lower than after Pearl Harbor, or than Pearl Harbor, but it did. We lost the Philippines, we lost Wake, we lost Guam. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And the hit and run carrier raids offered the first glimmer of hope that we could actually do something. Because, our morale was very low up until that point. And granted, it's February. It's only 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. But and even, Coral Sea occurred in May. We lost Corregidor in May. I mean, it was kind of a, hit and miss. We'd do something good, we'd do something bad would happen. We'd do something good here, something bad would happen there. But the hit and run raids, and especially Coral Sea, showed that we could go toe-to-toe with the Japanese, and we could inflict damage upon them. And of course, at Midway stopped the Japanese expansion right where, right there. They did not expand any further after that. And Midway definitely showed that the United States, not just the Navy or the Marines or the Army Air Force, but the United States and the people that were fighting for the United States had the willpower, the know-how, and just the sheer guts to stop the Japanese expansion. And from that point on, I don't really think, you could say that there was doubt at Guadalcanal, and there certainly was, but in reality, after Midway, everything went up. We took a couple of defeats at Guadalcanal, but we won the campaign, which is the most important thing. So, to me, it's important because, especially Midway, because Midway was the ultimate David and Goliath. We were just kind of starting to get a little momentum, but here comes this massive 200-plus Japanese fleet against less than 50 American ships. It was just, the odds were really not in our favor. And, as we know, it turned out for the best. And it's to me, it's the David and Goliath thing. We stopped the evil empire, if you will. And I think it's important for people to realize what happened there, because at all three things that I just spoke about, because it does show the, not to sound corny, but it does show the American willpower and the will to win and the will to, do whatever you got to do to get things done. And I think it lacks in today's society, but that's something that, people can look at and see, these guys really had the odds stacked against them, and they went out there and they did what they had to do. And, in some cases, knowing full well that they weren't going to get home, that they weren't going to survive, and they still did their duty for their country. And that's the ultimate sacrifice.